Welcome back everyone to the Minecraft modding tutorial. We are going to try our best to finish the metal press today, finally. So we are still on 1.16.5 and using the official mappings. So again, I'm not familiar with officials, so I'm going to have a couple of issues here and there, but we can get through it. So let's go ahead and make that container class. So this one's not going to be too long. There is one particular method, and I'm going to have to look up what it's called, of course, that is a bit tricky to understand, and honestly, I don't know any way to make the code better than it is, but we'll get to that. Mostly just going to be copy-pasting that one. Okay, container type, and what is the other parameter? I don't actually... No, that is not the constructor I want anyway. I'm going to make my own. So, go ahead and declare our fields here first. So we've got two that we need. One is an inventory. And the other is IntArray. We're going to call that fields. Same as with the tile entity. So for the constructor, we're going to take an int and call it ID. I think this is actually like some kind of window ID or something. I don't know. It's internal stuff. A player inventory. An inventory. And an IntArray. So what we're going to do is call super, and we're going to pass it our container type, which we don't have yet. And the ID. Then we're going to assign our fields. Now what we need to do is add some slots for this container to interact with the inventory. The first one is going to be a plain old regular slot. And we're going to pass it this.inventory. The next parameter is the index of the slot, and these are 0 based, so this is slot 0, which is our input slot. We're going to put this at X position 56 and Y position 35. And this basically lines up with where the slot is on the texture. Now we're going to add another slot. This is slot, okay, that is a silent lib class in the class that I'm referring to here. So, we're gonna just do a quick anonymous class here. We're gonna get it at the inventory index of 1, X position 117, Y position 35. And we're going to override okay, in MCP this is called isItemValid. I'm guessing it's mayPlace. And in this case we're going to return false because we don't want the player putting anything into the output slot. I'll go ahead and rename that parameter just for consistency. And this one too. Now we need to create slots for the player's inventory. So for this, we're going to go ahead and create two for loops with an X and a Y variable. So this will be like the X position of the slot and the Y, and then the Y position. Yeah, I'm actually going to need to look this up because the decompiled code is just nonsensical. Once again, I have a silent lib utility method that I'm using here to kind of make this process a little easier. But I'm just going to go ahead and write out the code. Okay, so I'm doing Y in the outer loop, And that's going to be until we're less than 3. And we've got an X, which the inventory is 9 slots wide, so X less than 9. Okay, so we're going to add a new slot. And this is going to be using the player inventory, not this .inventory. Its index is going to be X plus Y times 9. Okay, let me actually just extract this to variables to make it a little bit easier to understand what's going on and easier to read. Okay, so the player's inventory is going to start at position 884. So our X position is going to be 8 plus X times 18, because the slots are 18 pixels wide. And the Y position is going to be 84 plus Y times 18. And just pass those in here. Okay, go ahead and add a comment. Player backpack. And then we need the player hotbar as well. So we just got one variable to loop over here because it's just one row. Again, this is the player inventory. The index is just X. X position is 8 plus X times 18. And the Y position is just 84 plus 58, which is 142. Okay, in the same way, I'll go ahead and just extract that just to make it obvious what's going on here. Okay, so this still valid method is probably what was called can interact with. So I'm going to call this .inventory still valid? Yeah, still valid. Okay, now I've got one method that I want to define here. This is going to be return an int, and we'll call it get progress arrow scale. And this is going to be used by the GUI or the screen. But since it requires access to that fields object, putting it here makes sense. So in our fields, field 0 should be our progress. Yes, that's our progress right here. And we're going to say if the progress is not equal to 0, then we're going to return progress times 24 divided by, and currently we've just got a fixed work time for all recipes, so we're going to have to do something else there eventually, but for now we can just say metal press tile entity dot work time. And otherwise, we're just going to return 0. Because the machine is clearly not working if the progress is 0 or less than 0. Or, well, it will never be less than 0. But yeah, so that might actually be better to say greater than 0, just in case it is somehow negative. Okay, finally there's another method that we need to override, and this is the one that's a bit of a doozy. This used to be called transfer stack in slot by MCP, so I'm going to need to figure out what it's called. It returns an item stack, and it takes a player and an integer as a parameter. Quick move stack. That is probably the one that I'm thinking of. Let's go ahead and look at an implementation of that in like abstract furnace container. So, yeah, it is not very pretty to look at, as you can see. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just copy some code from Silent Gear. Same code that I've been referencing here. Paste that in, fix the errors. What is inventory slots? Inventory? Slots. Okay. Okay, this is the parameter called index. This parameter is called player. What is this going to be? Has item, probably. Get item. Okay. Move item stack 2. That looks right. Okay, let's go ahead and just replace all of those. Move item stack 2. Slot.onSlot change is going to be what? On QuickCraft, maybe? Well, that must be it. No, that's not it. This one takes no parameters. Okay, let me see what the furnace does. Set changed, is that it? Yeah, that's probably it. Set changed. Now it's probably going to be set. Change that to player. Okay, that should be all we need to do here. So basically what this is doing is this method is called when the player shift clicks on a slot. So say if the player hovers over the output slot and they shift click, this is going to get called for index 1, and it's going to go through this, and it's going to get the slot. It's going to see, does it have an item? If it does have an item, going to copy it. Then we're going to say if index equal to 1, which it is, we're going to move that to some slot starting with just past our inventory. So in other words, the player's inventory. And somewhere until like the player's last inventory slot, the end of their hotbar. So yeah, this code is not very pretty. It's very easy to make mistakes here and create bugs. I'm sure you've all seen mods where shift clicking in certain inventories is funky. This is the method that's responsible for that. It is a headache. Okay, so I believe that's all we need to do here. So why is our mod container types not doing anything? Okay, let's check our registration class. I had someone point out that this way of doing things with all these deferred registers being here in one class and then all these other classes referencing it is kind of bad practice. And yeah, I do kind of agree with that. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure what the best way to structure this is. I honestly don't remember how I came into using this particular setup, but it just kind of happened. If you think you know a better solution, then by all means point it out to me. I am not afraid of criticism. Okay, so we do have our containers deferred register, so that's ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and create like a little helper method down here. So it's going to be a generic method. of t extends container. Call this register. I believe we have similar methods in a variety of in all of these classes pretty much. And it's going to take an I container factory of type T. And we're going to return registration.containers.register name and a supplier here that supplies iForgeContainerType.create of factory. So, I mean, obviously you could just put this in up at the top with your constants, but this just kind of makes it look a little bit cleaner. Okay, why are you not happy with this? Because I did not specify the return type. It returns a registry object of container type of T. Simple enough. So now for our metal press field, we be a registry object of container type, and I think we do actually need the specific type in this case, although I'm not sure. I can't remember. And we're going to call register metal press, and we're going to pass it metal press container new. And that should work, so why does it not? I must have missed something here. Yes, we actually do need a second constructor. So this one is actually a little bit different. I believe the first one we made is typically done on the server side, and this one's more of a client thing. I'm not an expert on how all of this works. So starts off the same, but instead of the iInventory and iIntArray, we've got a packet buffer. And we're going to call our other constructor from here. So we got the ID and player inventory already. For the iInventory, we're just going to make a new instance of our tile entity as a placeholder. And for the fields, that's a new int array. Again, just kind of a placeholder. And we can say buffer.readByte. And I believe we actually programmed that part in already, didn't we? With the encode, yeah, the encode extra data method. So this is where it's reading that value that we wrote here, which is the number of our fields. This is kind of unnecessary, but it's better than having that number hard-coded in two places. We just have to update our fields here if we're adding stuff, and then it will just automatically update here because we're sending it to the client. Okay, finally, let's get to the screen. So this is going to extend container screen of type metal press container. So we got one method that we absolutely have to implement there. We'll get back to that. We need a constructor. And that is actually the signature that we're going to use. Now we're going to override a method. I believe it will be this one. Let me just look at some other implementation. Yes, that should be correct. So, actually, I'm just going to go ahead and copy that code because it looks like it's exactly what I need. Let's go ahead and rename these parameters so that the code is a bit more sensible. I believe this used to be called mouse X in MCP. That's what my code has. I'll just go ahead and call it X and Y. And the float is partial ticks. So what's this going to do is it's going to render a background, which is like how when you open a menu, like everything else is kind of a little bit darker. That's the background. It's going to call super.render to do all the normal stuff, and then render tooltip to render tooltips over hovered items. I don't know why these two things are not just done standard, but yeah. So pretty much every container that I make has to override render like this. Now for render BG, this used to be called draw GUI container background layer. So much shorter name now, less of a mouthful. That is matrix stack partial ticks X and Y for the parameters. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and do like a quick if Minecraft equal to null check, just so that IntelliJ won't complain at me. Then we're going to call, and this is rendering code. This is the stuff that I absolutely suck at, but I know how to do this much at least. I don't know why render system is deprecated. It is, but anyway, we were going to pass it 1, 1, 1, 1, so we're going to say tint everything white, as in don't tint it. Now we're going to say Minecraft dot get texture manager dot bind, and we need a resource location for our texture. Just go ahead and make that a constant. Tutorial mod. No, I don't have the helper method there, do I? Thought I had that resource location helper method, but apparently I do not. Okay, never mind. Clearly it's been too long since I've done this. So new resource location, tutorial mod.modid, and we're going to be looking in textures, GUI, metal press.paint. And let me actually check and make sure that that is indeed where that texture is. So we're going to go into resources, assets.tutorials, textures. We do not have that texture there. So I'm going to go ahead and make the GUI directory and copy that texture. Okay, so here's our texture. Yeah, this is the one from Silent Gear, and it does like mistakenly have the little energy bar here, but I guess we'll actually be using it. Yeah, I think this texture is literally just ripped straight from Silence Mechanisms, because you could see the green upgrade slot icon in the upper right here. So yeah, I was a bit lazy there. That texture needs to get redone one of these days for Gear, but whatever. It's just a texture issue. Not a high priority in my opinion. Anyway, back to binding our texture. Now we're gonna go ahead and store two variables here called posX and posY. So our X position is going to be the width of the screen minus the that could be X size, or it used to be called X size. What am I looking for here? Image width and image height, I believe. Okay. That's actually a much more sensible name, because it's like the height and the width of the image that's actually being used. The texture is 256 by 256, but the portion of it that's actually used for the window is smaller. At least for a typical image, or typical screen anyway. Okay, so the width minus the image width divided by 2. And the Y position is the height minus the image height divided by 2. So right in the middle. Now we're going to call blit. And we need to pass it the matrix stack, the X position, the Y position. Now the UV offset of the texture, which we're going to start drawing from 0, 0. The width of the texture that we're going to draw, so the max UV is going to be the image width, of course, and the image height. And that's pretty basic rendering stuff. We're taking a texture, it's 256 by 256, but we're only rendering from 0, 0 to image width by image height. So a portion of that texture is not even being rendered. At least not at this point. Okay, now we've also got the progress arrow to render. So, going to give it the matrix stack again. All the rendering stuff in Minecraft now needs the matrix stack. Our arrow in this texture is starts at 79 pixels from the X and 35 from the Y. The UV starts at 176, so you saw in the texture that there's this arrow here. It's like way off to the right and a little bit down. So that's 176 and 14. And the width of the text portion of the texture that we're going to draw is is that menu? Yeah, menu dot get progress arrow scale +1. And the max V is just 16. It's 16 pixels high. Okay, so that should be everything we need. Nope, it is not everything we need. We still need to actually register that screen somewhere, I'm pretty sure. Yes, and I have a habit of doing this in mod container types, because it just seems like a good place for it, because, you know, they're pretty heavily linked to the containers. So let's go ahead and keep doing it that way, just because it's what I'm familiar with. So this method is only going to be on the client, because screens are a client-side thing. We're going to call it register screens. And as a reminder of where this needs to be, I'm going to give it a parameter, FML client setup event. We don't need that, but I just like to do that as a reminder of where it goes. So we're going to call screen manager dot, which one is it going to be? It's not create, must be register. Okay, so our container type is going to be metalpress.get, and our iScreen factory is going to be just a constructor of a screen. So one thing I should mention here is whenever you're using this notation with a : new, that's finding a constructor that matches that specific interface here. So it's got this create method, which takes a parameter of type T, which is the container, a player inventory, and an iText component. Look at our screen again. What does the constructor have? It's the container type, the player inventory, and an iText component. So if you were to change this constructor, you would have to alter that to be a lambda expression instead. So just be aware of that. But typically, I try to keep my constructors for containers and screens to match these interfaces, just so that everything's a bit cleaner. Okay, and finally, we need to actually call this somewhere. And that is going to be in... Okay, so this is where the tutorial kind of deviated a bit from how I normally structure my mods, so I'm not entirely sure where to best put this. Why don't we have like a register client method here? Yep. Okay, and from here we can call mod container types.register screens. No, that is not right. Okay, how about this? Let's do a class here, an inner class. I guess that has to be public. Call it client. This is going to be an event bus subscriber. Give it the mod ID to make sure it knows what it is. The value is going to be what we can use to limit the side. And the bus is going to be which one? I think that's going to be the mod event bus. Okay, so we need to subscribe to that event that we mentioned earlier. FML client setup event. And in here, that's where we can call that method. Okay, what's your problem here? Okay, right. Alright, just forgot the mod ID equals in the annotation. Okay, so this should be everything we need to make this run. Of course, there's probably going to be some bugs hiding somewhere. I don't know why Gradle wants to re-import. I'll worry about that later. Well, apparently I need to re-import it now. Okay, never mind. Okay, so I'm having some issues getting this to launch. I don't know what exactly is going on here. I've been recording for a while, so I'm going to go ahead and stop here, take a break, and we'll get to debugging this on the next part, or I'll edit it in if it doesn't take that long. So, see you next time.